Yesterday, we laid down the prophetic timeline from the Reconstruction era to the present day uh, Trump presidency era. And we began to formulate the specifics. But one thing that I want to go back over so that we understand how we got to President Trump now, who represents the last Trump relative
Yes.
relative to this human mind matrix and the supporters of it, the latter day supporters of it, and custodians of it, and guardians of it. We have to go back to these two main programs that are running in individuals that call themselves America or Americans or incarnated recently in America. You were born and you woke up in America, or you ended up in America at a very early age. The two major programs that we focused on that were installed during and after the Reconstruction era between the times of 1863 and 1877 were the white supremacist version of this program, which included terror and violence. Now we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail before we go ahead. And the emancipationist vision, which sought full freedom, citizenship, and constitutional equality for so-called African Americans, actually indigenous Americans. Now I have down here the American flag and the Confederate flag. And the reason why I included the American flag in there, I had forgotten to talk about it yesterday, that when we look at white supremacists, we often just associate white supremacy with Southern Confederates
Gangsters.
and the Confederate flag. But the white supremacist vision, listen, included terror and violence. So we just can't um, restrict our notions of white supremacy to post Civil War Confederates. Prior to the Civil War, the American flag and the American conquest of the so called Americas was terror and violence, the same kind of terror and violence
Mm-hmm.
against indigenous people, so called African Americans. That's how they got the country in the first place. So we don't want to just, when we talk about white supremacy and racism, we don't want to just confine it narrowly to the Civil War history of the United States. People get offended when they see the Confederate flag, Malkia, but they don't get offended for the
Right.
same reasons when they see the American flag. But it
Mm-hmm.
represents the same thing.
Right.
One is called, it's blatant racism and white supremacy that is built on terror and violence. The other is a euphemistic version of white supremacy called patriotism. I want you all to hear me
Right.
because this is going to relate directly to Trump and the evolution of the white supremacist vision, all right, to modern day. We must understand this. So when you talk about a patriot, you talk about one that has committed what? Terror and violence and mayhem
Mm-hmm.
on
Mm-hmm.
behalf of the United States, same way the Confederates did. And when it is related to the indigenous people that were in this land, our forefathers, our ancestors that were in this land prior to the coming of non melanated, melanin deficient individuals, the same type of terror and violence and mayhem was prosecuted, and genocide was prosecuted against them as it was the post Reconstruction era so called African Americans. Are you all with me?
Okay.
So we looked at, so, we can't be fooled by that. See, these programs, you know, uh, some people might not, when this program is running, and you remember you had some black people supporting Donald Trump,
Absolutely.
but the white supremacist program possibly, and the emancipationist program was running simultaneously within that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they said, well, we're voting because we're patriots. And we want to see a better America. Are you all with me?
Okay.
So when we look at the Ku Klux Klan and their development early on, their establishment early on during the Reconstruction period, and Jim Crow laws that were enacted right at the end of Reconstruction and continued on until the civil rights movement of the 1950s, we look at
Mm-hmm.
this uh, uh, version of white supremacy that developed through the so-called Knights of the White Camellia. And we talked about that these individuals, that they were less violent, more secretive, less that you couldn't recognize them immediately. All right. And they were of a higher social stratum, and they included the professional newspapers, newspaper editors, magazine editors and owners, physicians, lawyers, law enforcement officials, public figures, politicians. And we said that these Knights of the White Camellia are the neoconservatives of today. Everyone with me?
Okay.
They're the neoconservatives of contemporary politics. Now, we must understand as we prepare to move forward that the id aspects of our personality, the nature, the instinctive nature, the divine nature of melanin was always known by the upper elite in the white supremacist movement. So the demonization of melanated possessive individuals was not just based on skin color solely. This is what we've been taught. this is what the view that most people hold. Why do they just hate us because our skin color? But it's not the skin color. It's not the color of melanin. That's not what we need to focus on. We need to focus on the energetic nature of melanin, correct?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that energetic nature of melanin is our divinity within us. It's our divine power. And they've always viewed that as anti. The expression of that, even in unconsciousness, Malkiel, the
Mm-hmm.
expression of that instinctive, energetic nature was viewed as antichrist, as satanic, as demonic. So this is why this was demonized widely in European culture and in American culture. And we looked at this publication, a quote from this publication that was actually uh, this so-called vision or inspiration was given in 1846 and published in 1879, and said that the Antichrist would be born of a Hebrew nun, a false virgin rather, who would communicate with the old serpent. Now, we want to focus on this serpent because this serpent, remember, is the id aspect of our personality. Are you all with me?
Okay.
That puts us in contact with what? This seething cauldron of energy, of psychic divine energy. Are you all with me?
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
the id aspect was always demonized. All right. And they knew that if we would contact and activate that and would put away this false notion of the serpent being evil, that it would put us right in contact. But look, morality, if you have a moralistic, if you locked in that moralistic context and framework, you will never make this connection
Right.
and always remain powerless. Furthermore, in the year 1864, Lucifer, together with a large number of demons, will be unloosed from hell. This is just so blatant that
Right.
it's funny to me because the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery
Uh-huh.
apparently freed us. So we were Lucifer and those demons. They will put an end to faith little by little, even those dedicated to God. What does that mean? To an external God that is located what? Outside of ourselves, not internal, not the id entity or energy. Are you all with me?
Okay.
Okay.
And they knew that this would affect that as we would activate that and begin to ascend and begin to demonstrate more and more the power of this psychic energy, which has always been demonstrated through music and through dance. All right, even in our descent, even in our fall, they understood that they would blind them in such a way that unless they are blessed with a special grace, these people will take on the spirit of these angels of hell. And that is us. And we know that in the 1920s, we looked that that spirit took hold of mainstream America and did what? Transferred even to Western Europe. and affected their culture as well. Several religious institutions will lose all faith and will lose many souls. And as I said yesterday, we're not going to go into detail about that yet, but we will circle back to it at another time. And I'll show you in history, just like we took, the snippets from these historical epochs, Reconstruction, Jim Crow era, Civil Rights Movement, etc., and so on, the Jazz Age. I'll show you where those religious institutions were affected and how. But we want to concentrate on this devilish aspect of our personality and how white supremacy has reacted to it throughout time and even in contemporary times, because this puts us directly into today, into the context and the environment of today, right now. So we said that these Knights of the White Camellia were a sanitized version of the Ku Klux Klan. Y'all with me?
Mm-hmm.
And that
Okay.
they transformed themselves into the patriotic, America loving neoconservatives of today. Make America great again. Are you all with me?
Absolutely.
So they moved us away from the blatant white supremacist conception of the Ku Klux Klan, and they softened it. And instead of white supremacy and racism, they waved the American flag patriotically. Neoconservative, neoconservatism is the contemporary, refined, political, institutional version of racism, white supremacy. Neoconservatism is the contemporary, refined, political, institutional version of racism, white supremacy. Neoconservatism was established as a counter or an offset to the rise of your id, subconscious divine energy. I'm going to repeat that again.
Mm-hmm.
Neoconservatism was established as a counter or an offset to the rise of your id, subconscious divine energy, which melanin recessive people have always viewed as antichrist, immoral, satanic, demonic, etc. Consequently, neoconservatism is the ego and superego writ large, designed to oppose the id, which is your divinity. Putting this in simple terms, Malkia,
Mm-hmm.
so that we have a clear view of where we are right now.
Okay.
The superego controls our sense of right and wrong. It's moralistic, good and evil, and guilt.
Mm-hmm.
It helps us fit into society by getting us to act in socially acceptable ways. The superego's demands often oppose the ids, always oppose it. So the ego sometimes has a hard time reconciling the two. So, even when we look at in the area of sports, over the last 2 years ago, the situation, Malkia, with Colin Kaepernick,
Right.
who, whatever you think about Colin Kaepernick, the emancipationist version of that program is running in him.
Mm-hmm.
wanting what? To be treated equally under the law. Now, there's nothing
Yes.
wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. We're just recognizing that that is a program that is run. And everyone from the NFL owners to the President of the United States, obviously, are opposing him because they say what? It's unpatriotic. Isn't that the
Right.
truth? They say
Mm-hmm.
it's unpatriotic to do so. So we see the presence of those two major programs running concurrently, simultaneously in contemporary society. Are you all with me now?
Okay.
Neoconservatism is a phenomena that at one level represents a historical and ideological reaction to the 60s rather countercultural revolution. So, understand that the energy, divine energy, is countercultural, it's counter societal, it's counter human, it's counter morality, it's counter
Mm-hmm.
tradition, it's counter old school and ancient and what is
Mm-hmm.
in the past. It is a historical and ideological reaction to the 60s countercultural revolution that established new freedoms for blacks, students, women, gays, and cultural minorities. These movements involved the struggle for civil rights and rights for members of the new social movement. So, again, the struggle for civil rights. It's a program that's running, Malkiel,
Mm-hmm.
and one that will never get you freedom because they have countered you at every stop, at every attempt to fight and enact and struggle for civil rights, or to manifest the vision, the emancipationist vision. Historically, you've been countered, and usually the counter is what? Terror and violence. You get a leader
Mm-hmm.
that rises up, like
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King Jr. And what happens? Terror and violence.
Yep.
Terror and violence. They got a counter for it because these things were created and instituted at the same time for a reason during a time of Reconstruction, so that they could family run concurrently, to run simultaneously and continually,
Okay.
and to keep us locked into this human mind matrix. We approach the id with analogies. We call it chaos, a cauldron full of seething excitations. It is filled with energy and it reaching it from the instincts, but it has no organization, produces no collective will. All right. So we said that
Mm-hmm.
that aspect, that energetic aspect, is what has been demonized, what has been um, defined and denigrated as what? The devil, Lucifer, demons, Satanism, demonism, etc., and so on. The neoconservative reaction is to roll back and repeal is a rollback rather and repeal of these rights. It's a counter. It's a counter that is allowed to exist at the same time. We're going to go into later or at another time about the wheat and the tares. All right, the wheat and the tares. issuing in a critique of liberalism and the alleged social disorder and anarchy. Now remember, we said that chaos was antisocial, doesn't mean social disorder, and it wasn't anarchy. It just referred to something before it was formed that resulted from the counterculture. This is always the threat, anarchy, social disorder. We'll lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
To be these blackies out here just running wild, doing what they, you know, every uh, impulse of their mind, you know. Thus, neoconservatives are profoundly anti-change, because that is what this energy that is within us, this divine energy, is destined to do, to change everything. Malkiel, to create a new heavens and a new earth.
Right.
All right?
Mm-hmm.
So, since the id, subconscious, divine energy, is profoundly chaotic in nature, neoconservatism is profoundly anti id and consequently profoundly anti rise, anti ascension, as far as we melanin possessive people are concerned. Change always involves a dark night, NIGHT and KNIGHT, when everything falls apart. Yet, if this period of disillusion is used to create new meaning, then chaos ends and a new order emerges. This is the threat. This is the threat that our divinity family, our connection to our divinity imposes. This is the threat that our connection and activation of this divine energy imposes. This is why we're going to take another look at President Obama, and I want to go into detail with what he, relative to what he really represented. It was nothing.
Okay. Shows.
It was
Yes.
nothing political. This is where
Mm-hmm.
we got confused. It was nothing political. Out of
Right.
chaos, new rules are invented, and new ways of thought are manufactured. The new ways of thought that we want manufactured are divine thoughts, divine perception. All great changes are preceded by chaos. So again, in 2008, when Barack Obama ran for president, he used one word to characterize his presidential campaign, and that was change. I
Yes.
want you all to understand this is no mistake.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I'm being so careful and repetitive with locking this down, because we often have just a mundane reaction to things that we see on a large scale. And, I remember when Barack began to run and when the possibility came greater that, he would have a legitimate chance to win the presidency. Oh man, our people, I couldn't even talk
Right.
because they were totally missing it. They got all emotional and stuff. And I get that, you know, and, you know, they began to, spout the emancipationist vision, in one version or another, Malkia, or the
Mm-hmm.
patriotic white supremacist vision, in one way or another, in one version or another, or both at the same time. And in so doing, they were completely missing the point. His presidential campaign was characterized by one word, one slogan: change. This word sent shockwaves of panic and terror throughout the ranks of neoconservatives who had witnessed the sudden energetic, inexplicable, and unprecedented rise of this melanin dominant son of chaos to the pinnacle of world power. In the mind of neoconservatives, the rise of Barack Obama was, of course, synonymous to and emblematic of the rise of the chaotic id, divine energy in melanin dominated people, a phenomenon that, as we have documented, had long been defined as antichrist, Luciferian, satanic, devilish, and demonic. Do we see this? And I have those quotes from 1879 here. Lucifer in 1864, all y'all demons was going to be let loose on the world from hell. As a consequence, and almost immediately, the neoconservatives instituted a vicious, intense, and unrelenting smear campaign aimed at demonizing Barack Obama, caricaturizing him as the very image of the apocalyptical Antichrist, the portent and embodiment of everything that these melanin deficient peoples have been programmed to see as satanic, devilish, demonic, dark, black, and evil. And family, all of them did not have to understand this perfectly
Right.
because these programs were running in different variations. And, some of them sincerely believed that they were not acting as white supremacists or racists. Why? Because of different versions of these things run. They would tell you, hey, I just think he's bad for the country. I'm a patriot. Well, what is that saying based on our definition? Saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they began to image him immediately as Hitler, you know, hail Obama, welcome back to the 1930s. See, we've already covered that. And they said he was a socialist and all of this,
Mm-hmm.
all of this to, because they had the recognition, you know, that, on the deepest level, that this represented some type of fundamental change, and it did. But it wasn't political. It wasn't political. It wasn't social. It wasn't cultural. It wasn't economic. And that's where a lot of people on both sides missed it, Malkia.
Okay.
And black people complain to this day, oh, he had 2 terms and he ain't did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Uh-huh.
He ain't did nothing for human black people.
Right.
So chaos equals divine power, the divine power of the id subconscious. That equals the power of ascension. That equals change and modernity. That equals the end of the simulated human mind matrix. That equals the end of the current age of melanin deficient people, their current dominance, their current role as custodians of this divine information and these divine instructions. We're taking them back. We're in full
Yes.
possession of them, family. This is why we can have this sort of class series. Former Republican Senator George Voinovich admits that in 2008, Republicans ordered to block everything President Obama wanted, even if it would help the country. So
Mm-hmm.
So we
Mm-hmm.
see these patriots,
Yes.
so-called patriots, moving away very easily from their patriotic duty. Do y'all see it?
Okay.
And becoming racist, showing their racist colors, showing their Confederate flag, because that program was running, family. If Obama wanted it, we Republicans had to be against it. And so, what does Trump do? Everything that Obama, when he gets into power, everything that
Right.
Barack Obama accomplished, even the little that he did, he repeals it.
Mm-hmm.
Obamacare, nationalized health care, repealed that, even to the harm of the individuals that were covered by it. Don't matter. They are trying to protect and maintain and sustain the status quo, to allow those programs to continue running so that they can stay in a position of dominance. Even the evangelists, of course, got into it. Obama paving the way for the Antichrist. A future world leader will be able to oppose God's laws and see, morality being the acts, the aspect of the superego that has to be taken in place. It has to remain in supremacy in order for this thing to work, in order for them to keep us locked in to humanity, to the human mind matrix. All right? So we went over that. And so, of course, uh, this designation of Antichrist and demon and sons and daughters of hell focused squarely on Barack Obama. We were in general, defined as that: Antichrist, immoral, satanic, demonic, especially as it related to our divine aspect. So we took a look at Ezekiel 21:25 through 32. And we've gone over this before, this particular portion of scripture. Um, and thou profane, wicked prince of Israel, referring to the ego, superego aspects of our personality, whose day is come, when iniquity shall have an end. Thus saith the Lord God, remove the diadem off the ego and the superego, take off the crown, this shall not be the same. Exalt him, that is the id, part of our personality, that is low, abase him that is high, and I will overturn it, and it shall be no more until he come whose right it is, that's Shiloh, and I will give it to him. Following very closely with the prophetic timeline. Precisely, I should say. Focusing on the 28th verse now. And thou, son of man, prophesy and say, thus saith the Lord God, concerning the Ammonites. The Ammonites, we'll go into detail about that again at another time. And concerning their reproach, even say thou, the sword is drawn. For the slaughter it is furbished, to consume because of the glittering. And that was translated very obscurely and clumsily for a reason. The term glittering, the word glittering is the word barak. So below I have a translation from Young's literal translation of the Bible, which reads this way: O sword, keen-edged, furbished for the slaughter to the uttermost, because of Barak.
Mm.
Because of Barak.
Mm-hmm.
So Barak caused something.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to look very carefully. It wasn't political again.
Right.
Barak in Hebrew means a lightning strike, a glittering or flashing sword. So when he rode,
Mm-hmm.
it was a glittering or flashing sword that they saw in their
Yes.
innermost beings. And the one way we're going to look at his last name, Obama, is to look at the Hebrew word Bama, Bama, meaning high place. So it was a glittering sword, a lightning strike, a death blow from a high place. That's the Oval Office, family.
Eitai,
Yes,
didn't didn't you share the the zero was the beginning, the
yes,
O was the beginning.
yes,
There, there it is with Obama's name. O.
absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to get into a little bit more detail about this relative to this next thing that I'm going to point out as well.
Mm-hmm.
Baraka in Sufi means the serpent. And this is what we want to, we really want to take a look at this.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at Numbers 25, 8 through 10. Because this serpent, family, was lifted up. This serpent was lifted up, was raised up to the highest place, to the heights, to the high place. And this puts us in mind of what occurred or what was um, detailed allegorically in Numbers 21, 8 through 10. And the Lord said unto Moses, Make thee a fiery serpent and set it upon a pole. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. Now understand, we are not raising Barack Obama up as no savior. Let's
Right.
say that right
Right. Come on,
away.
show.
Let's say that right away. We're looking we're looking at his ascendancy as accomplishing something not religious, not spiritual, not cultural, not biblical like that, you know, but energetically. And Moses, I know that they've equated this to Jesus. And it should tell you something that mainline Christianity relate the fiery serpent being set on a pole in the wilderness here in Numbers 21 as Jesus being crucified. That should tell you something. If the serpent is the
Right.
devil, then how is Jesus the devil? See,
Mm-hmm.
dualistic thought, religious thought will not let you uh, solve that dilemma. Will not let you solve that paradox. But a holistic look at it will. And Moses made a serpent of brass and put it upon a pole. And it came to pass that if a person had been bitten, if a serpent had bitten any man, when he had beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. And the children of Israel set forward and pitched in Oboth. Obama, Obama, Oboth,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Oboth. I know I got this right, Malkiel,
Right.
because the ancestors gave it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Both, listen, means water skins. Both
Mm.
means water skins or water bottles or wine skins. And it puts us in mind of don't put old wine in new wineskins. You got to put new wine in it.
Yes.
Got to change it up.
Mm-hmm.
Are you all with me?
Okay.
It is the plural of the word ob, H178. Ob means a familiar spirit. Multitudes of meaning in here, family. It means a familiar spirit. Follow me now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A necromancer, one who evokes the dead, the people that had been bitten by the poisonous snakes were dying. And when they looked upon the snake that was raised up, the fiery serpent rather, that was raised up and set on a pole, they lived. A
Yes.
necromancer is one who evokes the dead. And he is also considered a spirit of a dead one. Let's look at what history shows us.
Come on, Chef.
It's related to the word Ab as well, being the head and founder of a household, group, family, or clan, an ancestor.
Mm-hmm.
We get ready to see who Barack Obama actually was, family. A founder, a first ancestor, an originator or patron of a class, profession, or art. Here's a picture of Obama on the left and a picture of a hieroglyph, a drawing on the right when he visited Egypt. Family, bear with me.
Mm.
All of this
Right.
is connected. I cannot tell you in one session. All of
Yes.
this is connected. All of it is
Mm-hmm.
connected. All
Yes.
of it is connected. Our ancestors are doing this.
Mm-hmm.
During a visit to Egypt, Kemet, ancient Kemet,
Kemet. Yes.
President Barack Obama toured the pyramids of the Tomb of Kar with Secretary General of Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, Zahi Hawass. Obama is seeking to repair the United States relationship with Muslims worldwide. Do, do you know that they castigated him for this
No question.
politically?
Sure did. Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't about this. It wasn't about nothing political. This had to happen by virtue, family, of his instinctual, impulsive notion to what? Repair relationships with Muslims worldwide. If he wasn't following that impulse, that was not politically correct, that did not look right for a person with the middle name Hussein to be doing,
Mm-hmm.
did it anyway. And it brought him to this.
Yes. It ain't coincidence.
Ain't no coincidence.
Mm-mm.
In a genuinely unscripted moment, they said it was unscripted, but it was scripted. Our ancestors scripted it.
Yes.
In the tomb, Obama astutely noticed the metunetr here, which means face. Most media outlets covered the humorous moment as Obama exclaimed, "That looks like me."
Right.
"Nah, Barack, that is you.
Is you right? Yes.
Look at those ears.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all see this?"
Yes. Shape of his head.
Everything.
Mm-hmm.
However, the outlets have not explored the fact that the ancient Egyptians chose to represent such a fundamental word with the image of a man with very clear so-called African features. He's an ancestor.
Yes.
He's an ancestor that
Mm-hmm.
incarnated.
Mm-hmm.
Appearance was supposed to wake up the dead. We're talking energetically, family. See, we don't recognize these individuals when they appear because of the program that is running. And it's
Yes.
hard for some of you even now
Mm-hmm.
to connect with what I'm saying because a program is running in you. You have a fixed view of this so-called reality, which is illusory. And that fixed view will not allow you to see this. The name of the national god Baal is supposed to signify nothing more than Lord. That is the word Baal, family. Baal, Baal.
Yes.
Supposed to signify nothing more than Lord, and was also sometimes appropriated to deified heroes, our ancestors. It is more probably an abbreviation of Ob-El, the serpent god.
Mm. Mm.
See, the way that you wake up the dead and evoke the dead aspects of you is through Kundalini energy,
Can.
activating the serpent, activating that id energy. Are you all with me?
Absolutely.
So, Obel, the serpent god, the Greeks remarks, Brian called him Beliar, which is singularly interpreted by Hesychius to signify a dragon or great serpent. From the Chaldeans, we are told that the Hebrews obtained the word Abadan. See, this is Ab here. We followed Oboth to the word Ob to the word Ab, which means ancestor. We get the word Abba.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Obtained the word Abadan as a title for the Prince of Darkness.
Man. Man, man, man. Wow.
This word may signify the serpent lord. Heinsius, cited by Bryant, makes Abaddon to be the same as the Grecian Python or Python. It is not to be doubted that the Pythian Apollo is that evil spirit whom the Hebrews call Ob or Ob and Ab, as in Abaddon. The Hellenists, Apollyon, and the other Greeks, Apollo. This is corroborated by the testimony of St. John, who says they had a king over them. Book of Revelations. the angel of the bottomless pit. The one that was what? Below, abased, and then was exalted. Are y'all with me?
Okay.
Whose name in the Hebrew was Abaddon, but in the Greek Hellenistic tongue hath his name Apollyon. This is the same angel of the bottomless pit. This same angel of the bottomless pit is in another place called by the evangelist the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan. Are you all understanding this? Are you seeing this with new eyes now, family?
Absolutely shows.
So, as we get into the age of the Oriphiel now, we can, when they start talking about the Antichrist and demons, we understand perfectly what they're talking about. And the election, which is of President Trump, which is highly unlikely, we began to understand this now because it was a quote unquote patriotic surge that brought him to power. And at the same time, Malkiel, it was
Mm-hmm.
a racist white supremacist surge
Yes.
that brought him to power. Under this slogan, Make America Great Again. See, they said that Barack Obama, the change, would take us back to the 1930s. Remember, the change we need? Heil Obama, welcome back to the 1930s. That's not a real Time magazine cover.
Right.
That is, it's a, they can, that's a composite.
Photoshop.
Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
Photoshop. It's Photoshop. So, but that was coming from their hearts. That was coming from motivated by fear of what this change would do. So Barack Obama, they said, no, we're gonna maintain the status quo because I'm telling you, the the 8 years Obama was there sent shockwave. It put something in the ether, family.
Okay.
It put something in the ether. It opened a tremendous energetic gateway.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing that an individual that holds an emancipationist vision, where that program is right, nothing that they would recognize ever, because they're looking for it to advance black people within what? The false simulated human mind matrix.
Right.
To affect them politically, culturally, economically, etc., and so on. Was not going to happen, will never happen, unless we recognize the energetic nature of what it is that occurred here from a non-physical, non-material standpoint and perception. We won't get it.
Eitai,
Yes, sir.
just in support of what you're saying, two things. One, I was in Ghana when Obama was elected,
Uh-huh.
and there was no big political implications of the election of an American president,
Uh-huh.
but there was such a celebration that you couldn't hardly grasp it because of that spiritual energy that was unlocked.
Yes.
It was just you wouldn't believe the level of celebration. You would think it was one of your brothers that well, that's what it was. One of the
Yeah.
brothers that had taken that position. It was
Right.
just so celebrative.
Right.
Now, swing forward to today on the other side of the coin. Day before yesterday, I read an article on my phone. You know, I read the news every day. Most of the news on my phone begins with the word Trump in the first sentence.
Right.
They had this article about a Southern preacher, a Southern Baptist preacher, who was preaching a series on the Ten Commandments.
Okay.
And it was like a story. They blended in and they talked to the people about Donald Trump and what he represents. You mentioned the conservative, the neoconservative. This Christian right has, as you said, they portrayed Obama as the Antichrist, and Trump is the savior.
Yes.
Cyrus, I think it's Cyrus, the one who never knew God, but God was going to use him.
Right.
And so, but the picture in this article was so powerful of the ordinary people under the banner of white supremacy. I mean, the simple folk, how afraid they are, how dependent they are,
Yes.
that Trump is their savior.
Yes.
Trump has come to save the ordinary, poor, white people. And the pastor, the whole article was like a story. What was the pastor going to do when he preached about adultery? You know, Trump's the guy who said, grab her in the crotch.
Right.
I mean, he
Yeah.
used a more illustrative word.
Right.
And he's the same guy who is well known to be a philanderer. I mean, there's no other way to look at it.
Right.
So that means he's an adulterer. And the guy was preaching on adultery. And so the whole tension of the article was, what was he going to do? Was he going to mention the president when he started talking about, before he finished his sermon on adultery?
Right.
And you know the answer. I mean, they wrote the article in such a way that there was a tension, a question. But when they finished, the question came to his mind, but he closed his Bible and stepped out. So I'm just putting that in agreement with everything you're saying. Trump represents, as Gabrielle said, their final play. You're playing with, or even you're playing Spain. When you play that final Trump, then what happens next?
That's it.
You want to see the team you're playing against play their final Trump.
That's right.
They're playing their final Trump. And it's interesting that Indian, a guy from India who lived in Michigan, who's an immigrant, lived in Michigan 30 years, is the first time I've heard a Democrat raise the issue of racism. And that's only a mild issue because it's really white supremacist ideology.
Absolutely.
That has to be spoken of. But this guy mentioned, he said, we're going to keep Trump's racism out of Michigan. Well, Trump carried Michigan, so I doubt if he's going to keep. I mean, everybody knows the white supremacist ideology is alive and well, but nobody is mentioned. It's not to be mentioned. It's to be carried out. To go, and what you said was so powerful yesterday. Barack Obama was talking about change that will move us forward.
Right.
And Trump is talking about, let's go back to the good old days of Beaver Cleveland.
Yeah, right.
To the 50s. I mean, the vision of Theodore Roosevelt, a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. So this is where we are. We're it's happening. And like I said, I was in Africa to see the Obama phenomenon, and I just read an article yesterday about the Trump phenomenon. So I just wanted to share that and agree with it.
Very good. Powerful. very powerful and very relevant,
Dang.
very much
Absolutely shows.
what it is that we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
So we understand that his election was a um, retributive referendum on the election of President Obama. It has to be, family, an offset, a counter. You can look at it throughout history. And, from the Reconstruction era on up to now, it is always a counter. And whether it's white supremacy, on that basis, just blatant, or patriotism, this patriotic ethos that is played over and over again. It's all of it is based on terror and violence, genocide, mayhem, and mass slaughter of men, women, and children. Whether you wave a flag over it with all the stars and bars, or that Confederate flag, that makes no difference.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same. It's different version of the same thing, of the same program. However, we said that the pit that they think that they're digging for us, they're digging for themselves. They're digging for themselves. Psalm 7, verses 14 through 16, talks about this in detail and in keeping with what our theme, our major themes, and our major points of emphasis throughout this whole journey through the prophetic timeline. Behold, he travaileth with iniquity, and hath conceived mischief, and brought forth falsehood. He made a pit and digged it, and is fallen into the ditch which he made. His mischief shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealing. Remember that's what the white supremacist patriotic agenda is all about. Violent dealing
Mm-hmm.
shall come down upon his own pate. And the same way with Psalm 57, 4 through 6. We won't read that. But we traced yesterday and talked about this Russian American age that would come into play during this time. And we see that very clearly with this,
Yes.
the scandal represent, that was even before, that began even before Trump was elected president, with his dealings, business dealings with Russia, and then subsequently the uh, the alleged Russian influence on the 2016 election, and which there is no doubt, if you've been following the news lately, there
Dang.
there is no doubt that Putin got videotapes and naked pictures of Donald Trump.
No question shows.
It's
Big
no
time.
question. It's no question.
He got a
So
whole portfolio.
yeah, we saw this played out, with the 2 hour long private meeting with only the
Mm-hmm.
interpreters in there, none of his staff, none of his closest advisors. Y'all know what went down, So this brings this Russian, American Russian age into sharp focus and
Yes.
undeniable focus. Uh, so American and Russia dramatically take center stage in the age of Oriphiel. And, we showed the articles, and, we talked about the fact that their, um, the white supremacist view of this is to foment and to cause a race war.
Mm-hmm.
Because understand, they have the history of violence and terror. And this is something that is encoded, family, in the DNA of melanated possessive individuals of the West, of this country, in this area. So they have you know, the natural advantage in the era of physical confrontation and violence. That is not our thing. That is not
Nope.
our thing. Much to popular, uh, you know, much in the face of popular thought. That is not our thing. We have been cast in the image of the most violent, paradoxically, and we've been the foremost victim of that, direct victim
Mm-hmm.
of the same people that have cast us in this image. So what they want to uh, create is this violent fight between melanin deficient individuals and melanin possessive individuals. But it's not going to go that way because they are not controlling this thing.
Right.
You know, President Trump for sure has created um, this racial divide, being the most divisive individual that we've had in office. He's managed to deepen the country's divide along ethnic, racial, political, philosophical, educational, and geographic, rural versus urban. And you know what that is, North versus South.
Right.
Same divisions of
Mm-hmm.
Civil War. When you understand where his states are, you know, of support, I mean, you understand very clearly. And this is who he speaks to, his base all the time. This prediction of a race war, Steiner says, that a war between whites and non-whites is a historical necessity. Evolution cannot proceed properly otherwise. So you see these individuals that were the custodians, Malkiel, of
Mm-hmm.
this information that was given by our ancestors, that they have, edited it so that they come out on top, that they come out as the ones that are setting the prophetic timeline. They're not.
Right.
We right
Exactly.
now, and for the last
Exactly.
days, we've been setting the prophetic timeline,
Mm-hmm.
and theirs does not fit. Theirs does not fit in the overall context of the true prophetic timeline, and ours does. That's just, I mean, it doesn't need to be even stated. It is self-evident. So we see why all of this stuff has occurred recently. I want to focus on this too as we wrap this up, because this is where we began. We began in taking a look, family, at these three major aspects of personality: id, ego, superego. And we made the assessment that the id represents that subconscious, divine, inexplicable power and energy that is, in fact, our divine nature, our divine id entity. We get the word identity. It is the true id entity is divine. Our true id entity is divine. That is the only real thing that we have about us. The superego, the moralistic codes that we carry, that have been programmed in us, that govern the human aspects of ourselves. Those two things are not real. They are part and parcel of the human mind matrix. So this next portion, it's curious that they mention this, and very appropriate that they mention this as well, because this is where we began. And of course, they have this thing inverted. At the end of our fifth great epoch, the post-Atlantean, there will be catastrophes that will work in a way familiar to those at the close of the Atlantean epoch. And these catastrophes, if we're paying attention, family, they are occurring everywhere.
No question.
They just had a mass spontaneous combustion. That's what I'm calling it in Greece that left
Mm-hmm.
50 people dead.
Mm-hmm.
They are saying it was something, excuse me, they are characterizing it as an event of biblical proportions. Are you all with me?
Yes. Yes.
What's happening in Africa, in Hawaii, in some of the volcanic islands all over simultaneously,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And again, not only in this document, but in the biblical document, the same type of framework or the same type of context in the end time framework is included. These catastrophes that will happen through the war of all against all, the seventh cultural of the seventh culture rather of the fifth epoch will find its conclusion. The seventh culture of the fifth epoch will find its conclusion. They know that it's the end
Yes.
of an age, but it's not going to end again like they have defined it. They have falsely and erroneously defined it. Our epoch will come to an end through a mighty increase of egoism in human nature. So, this is where we have clearly made the distinction between the ego and superego and that of the id. Are you following me, family?
Okay.
And on account of this, through the war of all against all, only those who turn to a spiritual life will survive the catastrophe, which in this case, and see when they talk about the spiritual life here, they're talking about it in terms of moralistic values. They did not mention the superego, but that's all that they know.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about a spiritual life in terms of a moralistic value, following commandments and rules and laws and statutes and all that kind of stuff. Only those who turn to a spiritual life will survive the catastrophe, which in this case means the war of all against all, just as only a small group of people, this is the remnant that they're bringing up now, a small group of people escape from the catastrophes of Lemuria and Atlantis. So we want to focus in on Lemuria and Atlantis. This is very important, and it's going to frame and be the subject of our next portion after this. The war of all against all will be still more terrible for those involved in it than were those, that is the disasters of fire and water, and again we've talked about this, which destroyed Lemuria and Atlantis, however terrible we may picture them to have been. So let's go down and begin as we close this portion to frame the subject of Lemuria and Atlantis. And we're going to be specifically focusing on Lemuria Mu. And as we get into that, you'll understand as we get into the next study, you'll understand why we're focusing on Lemuria Mu. The first root race and the early part of the second root race of protoplastic mankind were astral men. Now, I'm reading this to begin to frame our focus around Lemuria Mu and the type of individuals, the type of our ancestors that existed then. You're going to have to understand this. Remember, as we go further back to the seminal moment of our emanation, to the very first time we began to emanate into the physical, we were more energetic in our composition than we were physical.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say we were more apparitional. Let's use a arbitrary percentage. If we are 95% physical now and only 5% spiritual or energetic, at that particular time we were 95% non-physical and energetic and only 5% what we will call physical. Are you all with me?
Okay.
So these are defined as astral men. They were not truly human as we understand the term because they were mindless.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
Mindless. Didn't mean they was
Mm-hmm.
crazy.
Right.
That mind was not developed. Now, see, I wish Nasik was here now, but I'm going to share this with him because this really confirms everything that he was telling us for years,
Mm-hmm.
decades,
Mm-hmm.
almost
Mm-hmm.
ever since we've known him about this
Yes.
mind. He had a problem with it
Yes.
because they were mindless. The sons of mind, called the Manasaputras. Now, look, this Manasaputras, we're going to talk about the tribe of Manasseh.
Gotcha.
Manasaputra,
Mm-hmm.
sons of mind. We're going to get into this, family. Had not yet incarnated in them. Are y'all following me?
Okay.
And thus had not yet infilled them. This is what we're moving back to, family. This is why we emphasize this thing that we have to move away from mind, move away from the human mind matrix, move away and abandon human thought and human perception. The sons of mind, the Manasa Putras, had not yet incarnated in them, and thus had not yet infilled them, even in small degree, with the divine flame of self-conscious intelligence and thought. Thus, they were likewise unmoral human beings. Are you all
Mm-hmm.
hearing me?
Okay.
They weren't immoral, they were unmoral because they didn't have a mind yet, family, for the moralistic program to be inserted into.
Mm-hmm.
So they were unmoral, not immoral, because the moral instinct had not yet awakened into them. This is this time of innocence through our religious training that we talk about. This era of innocence. Are you all with me?
Okay.
There was no moral laws because there was no moral instinct. Individuals
Mm-hmm.
were unmoral because the mind had not been installed yet. We were more energetic than we were human. They were as unconscious in this respect as our beasts. Listen carefully. If these beasts were unmoral, they could do they could no more do immoral acts than they could self-consciously perform noble moral acts. They were
Right.
under, listen, they were under the virtually infallible, although unrecognized guidance and directing power of spiritual instinct. We were all ears at that time,
Mm-hmm.
or mostly all ears, all controlled by the ear, which kept them both from moral and physical injury. But as the plants of today are neither moral nor immoral, but are guided with almost infallible prescience by the generalized spiritual and intuitional instinct working in and through them. These beings of the first and second root races of mankind were mentally very much like little children. Is it following, family?
Okay.
I told you it would all fit in, but we had to be patient and we had
Mm-hmm.
to set down the groundwork. They were very much like little children because mind per se does not manifest its sublime powers in the child in its earliest years.
Right.
So we're going to take a look at these early so-called root races. That races didn't exist, family. I know that they're talking about them in this terms, but was an aspect of emanation, of
Okay.
the emanation process within the physical realms where we were more spiritual and energetic than we were what? Physical. This is what we're moving back towards.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense?
Absolutely.
Is it all fitting together, family?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So
Big
Okay.
time, Gustavo.
we're going to end right
You
here
said
and open it up for questions and comments at this point.